Have you noticed how some things in your life no longer respond the way they once did? Not because they suddenly became dramatic or painful, but because they feel strangely hollow. As if the same movements, the same explanations, the same reactions no longer carry weight. Many of you sense this first in the body, not in thought. A quiet pressure in the chest. A subtle fatigue that appears even on calm days. Moments where you pause and realize that you are repeating something that no longer feels true inside you. This is not confusion, and it is not failure. It is perception adjusting. When perception begins to change, the mind often tries to label the experience as uncertainty or loss of direction. But what you are feeling is not the absence of clarity. It is the absence of resonance. Something that once aligned no longer does, and the body notices before language forms. You may still be functioning normally. You show up. You respond. You do what is expected of you. Yet inwardly there is a growing sense that effort is replacing alignment, and explanation is replacing truth. This moment can feel unsettling because the old reference points no longer stabilize you the way they used to. External validation carries less weight. Roles feel thinner. Reactions feel delayed, almost mechanical. We are present with you in this space. We, the Pleiadians, are not entering your awareness to disrupt your life or redirect your choices. We remain present as a stabilizing field when inner orientation begins to reorganize. Our function is not intervention. We do not step in to change events, decisions, or outcomes. Our role is to guard the emotional field while perception shifts, so the transition does not feel overwhelming or disorienting. We translate what is already happening within you. The subtle recognition that the old way of navigating reality is no longer sustainable. The quiet knowing that something more coherent is trying to emerge. Nothing needs to be decided right now. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be understood fully. Simply notice how something inside you is beginning to settle into a different rhythm. A rhythm that does not rely on force or reaction, but on internal congruence. Allow that adjustment to continue without naming it yet. Without concluding anything. Something is already aligning. When the idea of coherence begins to surface, it is often misunderstood almost immediately. Many associate it with calm behavior, emotional balance, or a kind of permanent inner peace. Others believe coherence means agreement with people, circumstances, or outcomes. But coherence is not a state you perform. It is not a personality trait. And it is not something you achieve by controlling yourself better. Coherence is a natural process of alignment. It emerges when perception, emotion, and action stop pulling in different directions. Not because they were forced to agree, but because resistance quietly dissolves. This is why coherence often feels unfamiliar at first. Most human experience has been organized around reaction, around adjustment to external expectations, around maintaining structure even when internal resonance is absent. In everyday life, incoherence shows up subtly. You commit to something while your body withdraws. You explain your position while something inside you feels exposed or tired. You continue forward, not because it feels right, but because stopping feels unsafe. This does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you have been navigating by external reference points for a long time. When coherence begins to matter, the system resists. The mind looks for rules. The nervous system looks for certainty. Old frameworks attempt to reassert control. This is where many misinterpret the process. They assume coherence will provide immediate clarity, direction, or answers. But coherence does not operate like guidance from the outside. It does not tell you what to do. It reveals where energy naturally aligns and where it does not. This is why coherence cannot be imposed. The moment it becomes a demand, it collapses into tension. The moment it is treated as a solution, it turns into another form of control. What you are experiencing now is not the loss of structure. It is the exposure of structures that were never fully aligned to begin with. And because this process is internal, it is often invisible to others. Your life may look unchanged from the outside, yet inwardly something fundamental is reorganizing. This is why coherence is often misunderstood as confusion, detachment, or withdrawal. In truth, it is sensitivity increasing, perception refining, awareness becoming less willing to override itself. Nothing here needs to be resolved yet. This is not a conclusion point. It is an orientation shift. And when recognized without resistance, coherence begins to organize experience on its own. What creates discomfort in this phase is rarely the absence of coherence itself. It is the relationship you have with noticing that absence. When incoherence is first perceived, many try to correct it immediately. They search for the right response, the right decision, the right posture. But the tension does not come from being misaligned. It comes from resisting the awareness of that misalignment. Recognition changes the entire experience. Not because it solves anything, but because it interrupts automatic movement. The moment you see what is happening, the nervous system no longer needs to compensate blindly. This is why simply noticing feels relieving, even before anything changes. Awareness restores internal permission. It allows perception to exist without being overridden. Many of you already sense this shift. You notice when something does not feel internally consistent. You pause more often. You hesitate not from fear, but from clarity beginning to form. This hesitation is not weakness. It is sensitivity returning. When recognition happens without judgment, coherence does not need to be forced. It begins to organize itself quietly. Energy stops leaking into explanation and reaction. Attention returns to the present moment. This is where a simple action becomes important. Not to express emotion, not to convince anyone, but to anchor awareness in the body. Writing stabilizes perception. It slows internal movement. It signals to the system that consciousness is active rather than automatic. To anchor this recognition, write in the comments, "I choose coherence." Do not analyze it. Do not refine it. Just allow the statement to exist. This is not a promise. It is a signal of awareness. And awareness, once acknowledged, begins to reorganize experience naturally. What tends to intensify this phase is not the experience itself, but the habitual way of responding to it. When coherence begins to matter, the most common reaction is resistance. Not always conscious resistance, often subtle and automatic. A tightening, an urgency to regain control, a reflex to explain, justify, or accelerate movement. Many try to think their way back into stability. They analyze their feelings. They search for the correct interpretation. They attempt to resolve internally what is not meant to be solved mentally. Others respond by hardening. They suppress perception. They return to familiar roles. They override inner signals in order to keep functioning without disruption. Some withdraw. They disconnect emotionally. They reduce sensitivity. They mistake numbness for stability. Each of these responses shares the same root, an attempt to control the process rather than remain present with it. This is understandable. For a long time, control has been associated with safety. Reaction has been associated with competence. And clarity has been associated with certainty. But coherence does not arise from control. It recedes when pressured. The more it is demanded, the more tension enters the system. When perception is overridden, the body compensates. Fatigue increases. Emotional reactivity sharpens. The experience feels heavier, not because it is wrong, but because it is being resisted. At this point, many conclude that something is failing, that they are doing something incorrectly, that they should already feel clearer than they do. This conclusion deepens the loop. The pattern that complicates coherence is not confusion. It is the insistence on immediate resolution. The belief that alignment must look like decisiveness or certainty. Yet coherence does not ask for speed. It asks for accuracy, and accuracy cannot be forced. As this becomes apparent, a quiet question begins to surface beneath the effort. Not loudly, not urgently, simply this: if pushing does not bring alignment, if control increases tension, then how does movement happen at all? That question does not need an answer yet. It only needs space. The movement that restores coherence is not avoidance. It is not confrontation, and it is not withdrawal from life. It begins much more quietly than most expect, not as a decision but as a shift in internal posture. Instead of pushing forward, attention softens. Instead of correcting perception, it is allowed to complete itself. Instead of reacting immediately, there is a small pause where sensation, emotion, and awareness are permitted to align before action follows. This pause is often misunderstood. It is not hesitation born from fear. It is not indecision. It is precision returning. For a long time, movement has been driven by urgency, by expectation, by the need to respond quickly in order to remain functional or acceptable. Coherence interrupts this pattern gently. It asks a different question. Not what should I do, but what is actually aligned here? When perception is allowed to lead, the system reorganizes itself. Emotion follows without being suppressed or amplified. Action then emerges with far less friction. Coherence does not require effort. It requires honesty. Honesty with what is felt before it is explained. Honesty with what resonates before it is justified. Honesty with what no longer aligns, even if it once did and once worked well. This honesty can feel uncomfortable at first, not because it creates conflict, but because it removes internal negotiation. There is less internal debate, less self-override, less justification. Many expect coherence to simplify life immediately, but coherence does not remove complexity. It clarifies your relationship to complexity. Small internal adjustments begin to change the entire field. Energy that was previously consumed by resistance becomes available. Attention that was fragmented starts to gather naturally. You may notice that certain conversations shorten, that explanations feel unnecessary, that decisions arise with less mental strain. Nothing external has to change for this to occur. The environment remains the same. Responsibilities remain. Life continues. What changes is orientation. Perception leads instead of reaction. Emotion informs instead of overwhelms. Action follows instead of compensates. This alignment does not lock into a fixed state. It is dynamic. It adjusts continuously as circumstances change. Coherence is not something you reach and keep. It is something you return to again and again. And each return requires less effort than the last. Clarity does not arrive all at once. It unfolds gradually as resistance dissolves. This is the movement that restores coherence. Not force, not control, alignment. There comes a moment when something reorganizes quietly inside, not as relief, not as certainty, but as a subtle internal congruence. You may not feel better in the way you expected, yet something feels less divided, less pulled apart by competing impulses. This is the moment coherence becomes tangible, not as an idea but as a felt orientation. What often happens next is subtle but important. The system tries to return to old patterns, to familiar reactions, to the comfort of explanation and control. This is not failure. It is inertia. Any reorganization requires anchoring, or the previous structure reasserts itself. Without anchoring, coherence is noticed and then overridden. Anchoring does not mean commitment to a belief. It means stabilizing a position long enough for the system to recalibrate. At this stage, what is being asked is not change. It is permission. Permission to let alignment guide action. Permission to let perception inform response. Permission to pause without interpreting that pause as weakness. This is where many misunderstand coherence again. They wait for a feeling of confidence before acting. But coherence does not always feel confident. Often it feels quiet, restrained, and precise. The urge to rush is a signal. The urge to explain is a signal. The urge to finalize is a signal. None of these signals need to be obeyed. They need to be recognized. When recognized, they lose urgency. And in that space, action reorganizes itself naturally. This repositioning is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not promise resolution. It simply places perception back at the center of movement. To stabilize this repositioning, a simple act of writing is useful. Not to declare intention, not to claim progress, but to seal awareness. Write in the comments, "I allow alignment." Let the statement remain simple. Do not add explanation. Do not refine it. This is not an affirmation. It is a marker, a signal to your own system that alignment is being permitted rather than forced. From here, coherence does not need to be maintained. It needs to be returned to, and return becomes easier each time. As coherence begins to guide movement more consistently, the external world does not suddenly rearrange itself. Situations remain present. Conversations still happen. Responsibilities continue. What changes is not the circumstance. It is the charge carried within it. Events that once felt heavy lose density, not because they disappear, but because they no longer pull energy from multiple directions at once. Reaction softens. Response becomes cleaner. You may notice that you are no longer compelled to explain yourself as much. Not because you have withdrawn, but because clarity reduces the need for justification. Words become fewer, but more precise. Decisions still require attention, yet they feel less fragmented. Even difficult choices carry less internal friction. There is less mental rehearsal, less emotional negotiation. This does not mean certainty has arrived. It means alignment has replaced urgency. Another shift often becomes noticeable. Sensitivity increases, but reactivity decreases. You feel more, yet you are less overwhelmed by what you feel. This is not detachment. It is regulation. Coherence allows experience to be processed without being exaggerated or suppressed. Emotion moves through rather than accumulating. Attention remains present rather than scattering. Because of this, energy returns naturally, not as excitement, as availability. You may find that you can stay with situations longer without fatigue. That pauses feel restorative rather than disruptive. That silence no longer demands explanation. Relationships change subtly as well. Some interactions simplify. Others reveal misalignment more clearly. This is not a loss. It is information. When coherence is present, what does not align becomes visible without judgment. There is less impulse to correct others, less need to persuade or defend. Boundaries clarify without hardening. You know when to engage and when to step back. not from fear but from internal accuracy. Nothing here signals completion. This is not a new identity. It is a functional shift. Life remains complex. Uncertainty remains part of movement. What has changed is your relationship to complexity. You are no longer pulled into it automatically. You are no longer consumed by it. Experience becomes navigable, and that is enough. At a certain depth, coherence is no longer experienced as something you apply. It is recognized as something that has always been present beneath noise, urgency, and adaptation. What you are integrating now is not a technique. It is an understanding of how reality organizes itself when it is not being overridden. Long before collapse becomes necessary, signals appear. The body senses misalignment. Emotion tightens. Attention fragments. Maturity is not the ability to endure these signals longer. It is the ability to listen earlier. Most human disruption does not come from sudden events. It comes from prolonged self-override, from ignoring perception in favor of continuity, from maintaining coherence externally while losing it internally. When coherence is restored as a guiding principle, growth no longer requires rupture. Change no longer needs to arrive through crisis. Learning no longer depends on exhaustion. This is a different relationship with intelligence. One that trusts subtlety. One that recognizes that clarity does not shout. The system you are part of is responsive. It adjusts continuously when allowed to do so. But when signals are ignored, pressure builds until adjustment is forced. Listening early changes everything. Not dramatically, functionally. This is why coherence feels quiet. It does not seek attention. It does not demand recognition. It simply maintains internal accuracy. At this stage, many realize something important. They were never meant to be guided by constant instruction. They were meant to be guided by internal congruence. This does not isolate you from others. It connects you more accurately. You meet situations without distortion. You meet people without projection. Integration happens when coherence is no longer treated as an answer, but as an orientation that informs every interaction gently. There is no endpoint here, only refinement. Each time coherence is honored, the system recalibrates with less resistance. Each time perception is trusted, alignment returns more easily. This is not spiritual advancement. It is functional intelligence becoming accessible again. And what you are sensing now is not something new arriving. It is something familiar re-emerging. As this process settles, there is nothing that needs to be added. No final explanation to reach. No understanding to defend. What has been moving through you does not require language anymore. It requires space, time, and permission to stabilize. Coherence does not announce itself as certainty. It arrives as continuity, a quiet sense that you no longer need to push against yourself in order to keep moving. From here, life continues in its ordinary forms. Tasks remain. Conversations unfold. Decisions still appear. What changes is not what you face, but the internal posture from which you meet it. You are not asked to monitor coherence. You are not asked to protect it through effort. You are not asked to maintain alignment perfectly. You are asked only to notice when you drift, and to return without judgment. This return is not correction. It is remembering. For many, this is where pressure dissolves most deeply. The pressure to be consistent. The pressure to get it right. The pressure to never lose alignment again. Coherence is not fragile. It does not disappear because attention wanders. It does not punish forgetting. It waits. Each time you return, the system responds immediately. Tension softens. Breath deepens. Attention gathers naturally. This is how integration completes itself. Not through repetition of ideas, but through lived recognition. You begin to trust the process because it proves itself quietly. You notice that reactions shorten, that recovery happens faster, that internal conflict no longer needs to escalate before resolution appears. Nothing here requires urgency. Nothing here requires acceleration. Growth does not need to be dramatic to be real. Maturity does not need intensity to be honest. As coherence integrates, something else becomes clear. You are no longer waiting for guidance from outside. Not because guidance is unavailable, but because it is no longer necessary. This does not isolate you. It refines connection. You meet others with less projection. You listen without preparing response. You act without splitting yourself internally. Responsibility remains, but it feels lighter because it is no longer carried against yourself. What closes here is not a message. It is a cycle of perception, and cycles close best without force. To seal this understanding internally, a final act of writing is useful. Not to declare achievement, not to claim insight, not to promise consistency, simply to acknowledge presence. Write in the comments, "I remain coherent." Let that be enough, and allow the field to continue its quiet work.